This is Groove Talk with FrogE Style.
Welcome to another episode of Groove Talk, everybody. On this episode, I am joined by Jeff and Darren, and they are part of the band Illyrian.
What up, Cody?
Howdy. Hey. So Jeff, you were on like the third episode of Groove Talk.
We've got some history, yeah.
Way back in the day. Now this is episode 75, so cool.
Congratulations, yeah. That's
nice.
That's quite a hike, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess just to get started, why don't you guys kind of tell the audience a little bit about yourself and about the band and give us an introduction?
Sure. My name's Darren May. I play the drums.
That's gotten better over the years. It's gotten real good.
We are a Calgary-based band. We primarily go under the moniker of death thrash metal. We've been active in the scene for, I think, about 4 years now. Once upon a time, we were known as Hellborn Death Engines. Darren and myself weren't part of that organization at that time. That was one of our stipulations when we came on, is we had to not have such a shitty fucking name. So that's how we arrived at Illyrian.
And here I am wearing a
Hellborn Death Engine shirt. Yeah. All comes full circle.
So I guess you guys just released an album. So I guess why don't you kind of give us a little introduction to that?
So we just digitally released the record last month called The Entity Unknown. And it is the best representation of what Illyrian is right now. We've gone through some changes since the last record, and we've evolved and matured, and I think everything. I think I speak for all of us. Like with this record, we left nothing off the table. we put everything into this one, and I think it shows. So it's been a process.
Mm-hmm. I just like to say that we did also physically release the album in addition to digitally releasing it.
Well, soft. We did a soft physical release at Loud as Hell, but the show this weekend is the big, hey everyone, this album's out right now.
Yeah. Awesome. So I guess what makes this album different from your last album?
There's a few things. I think it's hard not to talk about it without kind of addressing the elephant in the room that we did lose a member between this album and the last album. You know, candidly, we asked that member to leave. There was some personal disputes, some disputes over creative direction. He was very much half of the creative force. You know, he kind of wrote half the songs. He and Scott, the other member of our band right now, they had very different writing styles, different approaches to what they wanted to do with the music, and both were very valid and good, but they just weren't really syncing up with each other. And so we had about, at one point, I think about a year ago, we had, 15, 16 different songs. And we were kind of at this point of like, okay, well, we don't really want to release a 16-song album, and especially if it's kind of 50% one thing and 50% the other. And so unfortunately, there was some situations that kind of came to a head, and that resulted in us asking, Brandon was the individual's name, to leave the band. And, obviously he took his IP and his work with him. And so at that point, we were kind of looking at our timeline and said, okay, we still want to put out an album. We still want to keep moving with it. But now we're dealing with half of the material that we had previously. So on the one hand, that was a little stressful. I think that is kind of why the album is a little shorter in length. It's only just over 30 minutes, which was a little shorter than what we would have wanted. But, given the circumstances, we did what we could. The good news is that we all feel it's a lot more concise. It's a lot more cohesive. and I think it's more of what we actually were trying to go for, and not to put Brandon's writing on the spot or anything like that. Like, he wrote fine music. It's just we wanted to move in this direction, and he wanted to move in his own direction, and so we felt it best to part ways. And so the result of this album is kind of that. It's that we lost the member, and we really doubled down on what we did have, and I for one, I'm really happy with it. It's definitely the direction that I wanted to move in. Musically, I think it's a lot more up our alley. What we're hoping to do with it, what the message we're trying to send, the experience we're trying to invoke. So, yeah.
Okay. I guess, what is that message then?
Cool monsters, mostly. Blast beats, for sure. Yeah.
Fast double pedals.
Fast double kicks,
time.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Angry vocals, yeah. So vocally, this record sees myself, Jeff, the bass player. I'm much more prominent vocally. Previously, I'd been kind of more just a backup, shouting angry words here and there, and I really wanted to kind of push myself vocally after seeing I could sort of do it on round 2. And so this record, I'm quite a bit of the vocals, which is really sweet for me. And Scott actually stepped in because we had written, a lot of these songs were written lyrically before we asked Brandon to leave, so they were written with 3 vocals in mind. And so Scott really stepped up and does his vocals in addition to he learned how to do the low guttural stuff that Brandon had previously done. And I think he knocked it out of the park, personally. We're not sure what the future looks like for us vocally. We're still looking for a 4th member. If that individual happens to be a vocalist, then we'll work with that. But we're also at this point open to taking somebody who's not a vocalist and just sticking with 2 vocals instead of 3, which would be disappointing to an extent, only because we had it previously. But yeah, I think that's quite a different shift from round 2. Vocally, I think we're in an entirely different place, and I really like the direction that we're heading in on that. Is there a message to that? Yeah, I don't know. We try to be a little. We try not to take ourselves too seriously with the lyrics. So a lot of our lyrics are about video games or about comics. The single we put out, M&R Rising, is about a creature in the Warhammer fantasy universe. We got songs about Bloodborne. We've got songs about the manga series Berserk. One interesting one, actually, and I'll let you talk about it, Darren, was the track Lobotomus.
Yeah, that's probably the oldest song on this record. But it's one that I wrote the lyrics to, kind of talking about my struggle with depression and panic attacks and anxiety and such like that. And so it was at a time when we were in a flow of writing music in this system where Scott would come up or Brandon would come up with a structure and a bunch of riffs and ideas like that, and then Jeff and I would sprinkle our rhythms on there. And so I took this idea of, I heard that Iron Maiden sometimes starts writing songs lyrically first, and then will build the song around the lyrics and how a section should feel. So I took that idea, I had the lyrics written out, and then I basically put footnotes next to each section for Scott to take inspiration from. And so some sections would say, okay, this is fast paced, angry, this is where it slows down and we get this lighter sound, just little kind of footnotes like that.
Yeah.
And then Scott came back with this song, and for me he hit it out of the park with all the riffs and everything, and then kind of grew from there. But we were playing that song on the round 2 fight tour when we did Western Canada. Lobotomus was in that set.
Yeah, three years ago, I guess.
Yeah. So, and then it kind of stayed the same for a while, and then it slightly changed in the studio when we were doing pre-production, and So yeah, that one's it's a little different lyrically to the rest of the album, but I tie it in with the rest of the monsters in the sense that Vodamus is this character not too different from. I always envision the gentleman from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, those creepy guys in the suits.
Oh,
Yeah.
the Hush episode, yeah.
Yeah, so I always kind of envision a character like that, this suave-looking humanoid kind of character that brings anxiety and depression to victims.
Yeah, the song after that is about cooking and eating people on a television show. So it really just bounces all over the place for lyrical content.
That's awesome. So do you guys, it sounds like you kind of experimented with some songwriting techniques there. Do you do that a lot with a lot of different songs, or?
That one was kind of a bit of a black sheep. Generally, our creative process looks like Scott doing his Scott things, and he sits down and he writes some beautiful masterpiece that Darren and I then listen to and, you know, give him the thumbs up or thumbs down, or say we like this, we don't like this. Scott's very he's very good at what he does. He's got a very direct sound. He plays within a certain box and he does it phenomenally well. His background is a little different than Darren and I. Darren and I kind of come from more of a punk wheelhouse in his case. I'm really into the prog and kind of groovier stoner stuff, you know, back in my day. So I think we bring an interesting dynamic to his super fast, virtuoso, borderline neoclassical style of guitar. And then kind of between, you know, the three of that, we find a fusion of sound. And so 90% of the tracks are written instrumentally. We figured out the nuances, you know, we play the hell out of it, and then kind of, you know, once that's locked in, at that point I'll usually step in and say, okay, I'll write the lyrics on top of that. So how we did Levonimus, that was quite different. You know, it's not that we aren't open to experimentation, but we've just kind of found the system works best for us. Mm-hmm. And Scott's very good at accepting criticism, being open to feedback, and not taking it personally if we think something doesn't fit, or like, hey, you're tremolo picking for 3/4 of this song. Maybe let's do something you're not tremolo picking here. You know, like, yeah, he's very good about that, and I think that speaks a lot to his character. You know, if you've ever worked with artists, they can take things quite personally. They have a very distinct vision, and you know, I can't speak highly enough of how open Scott is to letting his work be interpreted by us, and I think that in turn really kind of brings his music to the next level through us, and then it becomes our music.
Awesome. I think that's like a key thing. If you are going to play in a band, you have to be kind of open to criticism, and because it's not just your work anymore, you know, it's the band's work, you know, it's the face that the band is putting on, so every member has to be happy with it. So maybe what's something that you learned from the recording of your last album that you kind of took and applied to the recording of this album?
Be prepared.
Yeah.
I can't stress that enough. The recording process for round 2 fight for me was probably one of the biggest learning curves I've been through as a drummer. Basically went into the studio and they switched the click on, and I was fighting it. Yeah. And I got very self-conscious, and ended up dialing back some of the drum parts that I had written because I just wanted to be on time. I wanted to be one with the click, if you will.
Yeah.
And so ever since that record, and our producer at the time, Casey Lewis, who is a phenomenal drummer, he lit the fire and inspired me and lit the fire under my backside to really work on this next record. And I made this promise to myself that I would not have that same fight in the studio as I did last time, right? So yeah. Going into this, we did pre-production more professionally. We had our producer that did the record with us in full production. He came down from Edmonton and we recorded the drums in our jam space. And it was pretty quick. We did 2 days, I think it was, or a day and a half, and we got the drums done for pre-production, and I felt good. A few little nuances here and there that we had to fix, but when it came down to the full production, I think that was a day and a half that we got drums done. But I spent a year. I couldn't play double pedals really when we did round 2 fight, and then I decided I was going to go with this heel toe technique and use double strokes, and I really wanted that fast 16th note sounding kicks, and I spent an entire year woodshedding. It would be half an hour here, an hour there, but like focused practice.
Yeah.
It wasn't just going in and trying to play to a song or anything. It was like boring, sit there, figure this out. And by the time we got to the studio, I felt like I was flying. I don't know.
Flying the helicopter.
I was flying the helicopter, yeah. And so that was the biggest learning curve from last album to this record, and I really, really enjoyed the process of this record. It was even there were moments where Brett said, okay, do you think you can do these double kicks in this section here, and maybe we'll change that there, and it was done on the spot, couple of takes, and we got it.
Nice.
It wasn't a fight, it was this enjoyable process. Kind of laughing at each other and just going, oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
I got new tricks, everyone. And I mean, that's what I learned. But watching Jeff and Scott from where I felt they were on the last record to now, like Jeff's vocals, he knows that he's stepped up his game, but he's very modest about it. It's night and day.
Yeah.
Blew me away when I heard the first recordings when I went up to Edmonton and heard those. And then Scott's low guttural vocals, I was like, who is that? Who's doing those? Like, you couldn't tell. And then the actual playing as well, each of our instruments we've just stepped up our game, I feel. And we do that for each other. We push each other, right? Like,
yeah.
Scott was having trouble with the solo in Void for the longest time. And so you're just like, nope, that's not it, Scott. I want it more rock and roll. I want this. And it's just trying to find the little avenues to light up that inspiration. And when you get it, it's magic.
Yeah.
Because Scott will come out with something and we'll look at each other and everyone's got that kind of nodding face and going, okay, this is it.
That'll do.
So yeah, I mean that's what I've observed and what I've learned. But what do you think, Jeff?
You mentioned my vocals, and I appreciate that immensely. I had quite a different approach to your quote unquote woodshedding. My approach was just drink a lot of beer and watch a lot of YouTube on how to do vocals, and there's this thing where if you like study for a test stoned and then you write the test sober, you like do really bad compared to if you write the test stoned, because you write the test in the frame of mind that you were studying in. So the thing about vocals, when you learn them when you've had a couple, is that tonally, I became quite dependent on having, and maybe this is psychosomatic. It entirely could be psychosomatic, but when I have a beer too, I think I'm a little more confident vocally. I think I kind of open up a little bit more from the diaphragm perspective. Something about the dehydration in my throat, I think, allows me to hit a certain kind of pitch. And I had all the intentions in the world to like train myself to do these vocals a little more soberly before the studio, and I just never got around to that. And I don't know if you've ever been in the studio recording, but it's kind of, you got a couple days to do what you got to do. And so they said, all right, Jeff, today's the day. You got to track all your vocals. And so I got into the beers, and 18 beers later we were done, and it sounds great. I don't really remember a lot of the process, but I don't recommend that approach. I don't condone the wanton abuse of alcohol, especially when you're trying to do something professionally, but you
gotta do what you gotta do.
means to an end. And next record, totally gonna figure this out. My next record, this record, still gotta figure that out. So, but it's just funny to hear you, Darren, about it. You sat there fucking Karate Kid style, like montage. Working up a sweat over weeks of work, and here's me like belching, sitting in my computer chair, like. And that's how we got here, That's it.
That's awesome.
I think Scott woodsheds too, a little bit. Like, didn't he find his guttural voice whilst driving his car?
I can see that. You should see this guy who does guttural vocal. His eyes go super wide, and he's like, he just looks so angry at the microphone. And then he steps back and he like calmly looks at his lyrics. I'm really angry in the microphone. Backs off again, like just flips a switch and he's into it.
He's got that Conan the Destroyer look. Yeah.
Nice. Well, like no matter what the process was, it sounds like for this record, you all just came like more prepared to the table. Like you decided you wanted to learn something, and you sat down and you learned it. And I mean, I feel like that's like kind of a mark of like a good musician. You know what I mean? Like there's people who want to play the instrument, but then they practice and they're like, oh, this sucks. You know what I mean? And then there's people who want to make good music, and practicing is just part of that.
It definitely sucks for a long while, and it sucks until it doesn't. And then
like with like anything.
With anything, yeah. Exactly.
Anything that's worth getting good at, it sucks until it doesn't suck anymore.
Very true. Very true.
And it's just like a switch, and you're like, oh, this is fun. I've noticed that kind of like both with Round 2 Fight and this album, like the artwork is really unique and it's very cool. So how important is the artwork to you guys for albums and stuff?
So the art, we kind of joke that our artist, a guy named Joshua Andrew Bellinger. I almost forgot his name there. Fuck. He's actually the guy that's done our art since the Hellborn days. I believe the story is at one point Scott knew somebody, a comic book artist in the States, that he had approached to do his work, and this guy said, unfortunately, I'm busy, but here, talk to my friend Josh, he'll help you out. And so that relationship was formed back in 2012, and literally every single piece of artwork that we've had done for the band has all been this guy. Josh is now a tattoo artist. We've never met the guy personally, but we've had a great working relationship with him over the years. We are very big believers in having a strong and cohesive brand. So having the same artist who not only produces fantastic work and just continues to get better every time we deal with him, but also understands our deal, is on the same kind of wavelength from personality perspective, from getting our shtick, so to speak. We just can't speak highly enough of Josh. We'll use him as long as he's available. He's always the guy that we're gonna go to first. If he's busy or he can't accommodate something, like we work around him a little bit. We say, okay, well, what if we gave you another month here? Could you make that happen? And like that's to us, his artwork is the visual component of our audio offering, as it were. Our live stage setup now, it's the largest piece he's done for us. Part of it is used as the album cover with the creature on the buildings, but that's part of a large kind of diorama type piece that's actually kind of in 4 quadrants. And so our stage setup behind us is that creature, sprawled on the buildings with the logo in front of it. But then on our guitar cabs in the foreground, we have these side elements and these other creatures that are kind of in the wings, as you were in this design. So we took this kind of banner type style design that he made for us and made a 3-dimensional like stage display out of that. That was something that we hadn't done before. You know, we'd seen bands like Black Dahlia Murder do something like that, and we were like, "That's fucking cool. Josh can do this, no problem. Let's get him on the horn." And he was just so down for it. He was like, "Yes, okay, I'm gonna put a cool creature here. This is gonna be on your bass cab." Like, he was just fully like, he quadranted it out for us. He's like, "This element goes here. This thing does this," you know. And it's just sweet to work with an artist that, you know, not only like is happy to work with you, but like is genuinely like, yeah, this is really cool. I want to be a part of this. Like, thank you for incorporating me and continuing to collaborate with me on this. And you know, we've got a few guys. You mentioned Brett, Darren. Brett is our producer in Edmonton. Brett Reed. He's another guy that very like-minded artist. You know, it's so good to work with people that like understand what you're trying to do, and not only appreciate that, but have their own offering. And it's like a genuinely good and cool thing that they're like, yeah, I think do this or try this out. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's the step in the right direction. Sweet, you get it. Hop on the train, buddy. Let's do this together. Like, that's so cool. That is genuine, authentic collaboration between artists. And like, if that doesn't get your dick hard, man, I don't know what to tell you.
Well put. I think that's one of the cool things is when other people are getting excited about your art, and they're so excited that they want to tell you what they can add to it, like, and what they vision for it and stuff. Like, that's one of the coolest things about art is that collaborative aspect of it. That's one of the cool things about metal too, I find, is like the visual aspect of it is just so interesting and so different from a lot of other genres of music that exist out there. Do you guys maybe have any thoughts on why that is? Or
I think most metalheads are all nerds. We all come from that background of video games or comic books or whatever it is. We nerd out on it, and so it's when you see the artwork, people just go crazy about it. It's hard to explain. Like the first Iron Maiden album that I bought was because of the artwork. It's just, you get sucked into it.
yeah,
And then you start, like the Somewhere in Time album, you could look at that for days and years and still miss some of the cool things that are in there, you know. So I think we all come from that background.
yeah.
I think just kind of on the concept or on the topic of art and metal, I'm a little like weirded out about the amount of like gore and specifically like violence against women I see a lot, and there's a lot of like imagery of like, I don't know, sacrificial shit or like just gory fucked up scenes, and like a lot of times it's like a female cadaver or something, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, where did that come from? And to be fair, that I feel like that maybe is kind of dying a little bit. Like, you don't really see that. And like, okay, you think of bands like Cannibal Corpse. Okay, cool. Cannibal Corpse can do the fuck out of that. They're called fucking Cannibal Corpse. Like, yeah, you can see that coming. But I remember there was this period of time, maybe the early 2010s or late 2000s, like there were so many fucking bands with these illegible logos and these horrific graphic images, and I guess it was kind of meant to represent the violence of the music or the ferocity of it, and I guess that's cool. But, you know, as you say, Darren, like, I think that the true gems of the metal world are the ones that kind of tap into that cool comic book style. Like you say, it's hard to put into words, but I just wanted to basically say I'm kind of glad to see that it's not just a bunch of weird, fucked up, grotesque imagery anymore. And like, that's got a place, sure, but for a while there, I was like, man, it's a weird theme to be seeing across several bands, and for like no real reason, right? Like, what did that accomplish? So
Yeah.
You think of bands like Iron Maiden, it's like that's kind of graphic in a way. Like the cover of Killers, he's holding a hatchet, and that's like, and Eddie's a fucking terrifying looking dude. Like, that's the right level of grotesque, you know? They're like, that guy scares the shit out of me. That guy doesn't look like he like kills women for fun. He just looks like he kills, and he's kind of creepy, and he's on the cover of a metal album. Like, that's the correct level of grotesque.
Yeah. And if you're gonna have like a mascot, then
Eddie is the primo mascot.
yeah. That is one thing that kind of bugs me about metal bands is like the illegible logo. It's like you just see some of these metal posters and you're like, I can maybe read 3 of these band names.
Looks like someone's just peeled it orange and all those white bits off the orange just fell on a black piece of paper and you're like, oh, cool.
Threw a bunch of twigs on the ground. I had a non-metal friend. He's looking at we played this festival Loud as Hell recently, and he's looking at the poster, and he's like, "Is it like a prestige thing? Like the less you can read your band name, the cooler you are, or something? Is that how this works?"
So I guess props to you guys for having a legible band logo.
Illyrian for life.
Illyrian.
We have to have a phonetic spelling of our name on our business card because, like, no shit, 50% of the people are like, yeah, Illyrian, you guys are fine. Fun fact about our logo, if you flip it horizontally, it looks almost identical to the same thing. And there's a word for that. It was in the that Dan Brown book, Angels and Demons. The dude was branding everybody with it. Fucking, this has a name and it escapes me, but it's some like cool font thing where it's like when you flip it, it looks identical to how it is. I think that's one. Our thing is that whatever that is called.
Isn't it kind of like the same with like race car, or is that different?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know what you're talking about, but I forget what
I want to say
called.
it's an anagram, but it's not an anagram because like SWAT is an anagram or like, right? Is that? I didn't do very well in English in school, you see. Anyways, our thing is that thing, so boom, mic drop.
Yeah. So when you were talking earlier, you mentioned kind of about how you want to keep everything like kind of a cohesive brand. So is that something that you guys have sort of done from the beginning, and like how important would you say that is to you, I guess?
I would say it's not really something we've done from the beginning.
Okay.
I think it's something we've kind of stumbled into. Like one thing that we have is like we have a certain shade of orange, and actually looking at your orange notebook reminds me of this. That's very close to our shade of orange. Like, we have a very distinct, like, I don't have the hue code in front of me, but like we're like, okay, we're using orange, like you got to use red 56, blue negative whatever the fuck, and like and I never really like, when I didn't really understand that kind of stuff once upon a time, and now that like we have a brand that we stand behind, I'm like, okay, when that orange isn't that orange but it's used on our stuff, like that fucking bugs me. It's like Coke has a very distinct color of red. If that red is slightly different, like that doesn't look like the Coke red, so stuff like that. That's been kind of interesting. That's kind of delving into the marketing world. That's kind of one thing. That's kind of the visual aspect of the brand. I think professionally, just kind of, you talked about this earlier, being part of something that's a little bit bigger than yourself. A band especially is a very collaborative effort. So making sure we're all on the same page when we're out at shows or networking with people or just kind of shooting the shit. Just making sure that the messaging that we're sending to people is all consistent. Yeah, just kind of having some sort of standard to adhere to. And that's interesting because, this started, I won't say recreationally, but it started less professionally than where we're at now, or at least where we're trying to get to. And we feel that, like, these are kind of the steps you can take personally to come off more professionally, or to, have people take you a little more seriously than just like, oh yeah, you're those guys that play on stage once in a while and you make the loud music, I don't want to say it's what separates the men from the boys necessarily, but I think it's kind of like how you go from being a garage band who plays local bars to, being somebody that can do a little bit of touring, that has a little more, some demographics of listeners that are out of their hometown, and as you say, building and growing a brand from there.
Yeah. I think that it's a kind of an important thing that a lot of bands do miss, is that yes, being in a band and playing shows is fun, and it should always be a fun thing, but there's also the business side to music. If you would like to take it seriously and you would like to be successful, you got to kind of treat it like a little bit of a business. You do have to have a brand. You have to have like a professional front. And I just think that like it's cool if you don't want to do that and what you're doing is just playing shows for fun. By all means, do that. That's awesome. But if you would like to make it more successful and take it somewhere, I think you need to treat it like a business, and you need to kind of have that branding aspect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's more to the business side of it. There's tracking your finances. Obviously being registered as a business. Eventually, that comes down to declaring your income. And dealing with that side of it. And so these are things we're just kind of learning step by step, honestly. Like, it's, we didn't start this coming in with 4 years of knowledge, reading a book. Hey, I have a degree in how to be a fucking successful musician. We're just kind of like, hey, let's try this. That didn't work. We should never do that again. Let's try this out next time. And slowly but surely, we're trying to figure it out. And we think we're doing better than we have up until now, for sure. And I think we've got a long way to go, but we're on the right track.
Okay, cool. Would you be willing to talk about maybe one of the bigger mistakes that you made in the past?
Yeah, we're flawless, actually. So we
flawless victory.
We've run into something recently with playthrough videos. If you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. We filmed 3 playthrough videos, and we were talking to our PR guy about them because we hadn't seen them be published or anything yet. So we were wondering what was going on there, and he says to us that most people aren't really biting on the playthrough videos anymore, which to me is kind of crazy because I spend a lot of time watching Phil Dubois, from the original drummer from Revocation. I watch a ton of his playthrough videos, and then not just him, but a bunch to learn how they're doing things, going back to this nerdy side of us. And so yeah, we don't know what's going to happen with those playthrough videos yet. I'm going to try and figure out some avenues, see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's a bunch of money that isn't going to be turned into revenue or some sort of growth, right? And and I think that's the hardest thing doing what we are trying to do is you're putting money in and you're trying to make the most calculated decisions financially, but sometimes they don't pay off, and now you're $600 to $1,000 in the hole, trying to figure out how you're going to recoup that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's one of the most recent mistakes. And
yeah, and you kind of talk about making poor investments. I think another one that we've kind of run into in the past is having just the wrong sizes of shirts for merch. Like we're like, all right, we'll get 10 mediums, 10 larges, and 2 XLs, and then we go and play in BC, and it's just a lineup of people looking for XLs, and we can't sell them anything, and they don't want larges. So suddenly it's like, fuck, we didn't realize that this was like a thing. Like we thought it was, we thought most people were these body sizes. That's who they are in Alberta. And so, I won't say we have a large surplus of things, but there are a couple, merch items that we have, like literally dozens of certain sizes, and nobody wants them. Like there's no, like it's just so hard to push that. And so that's one thing when it's, oh fuck, your cat just caught a fly and ate it. Super impressive.
He's a killer.
Yeah, bravo, buddy. It's great when you hit those marks, but it feels like some of these lessons we're having to learn the hard way, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like don't let your mistakes be failures, let them be lessons. But man, that's a hard pill to swallow, and that's like $300, $400 of t-shirts you're sitting on that you can't push, and like it just sits there, and that's the same thing with the playthrough videos. It's like when you're talking about wasting $1,000 and something that doesn't get you anything back, like okay, in the grand scheme of things, I guess $1,000 is not that much money, but like in the moment you're like, we could do a lot with $1,000 that so it's these mistakes, we're learning from them. And I think we've made a couple, not huge financial blunders, but little things here and there that have been hard lessons to stomach, just because they do have a price tag attached to them.
Yeah. Just the t-shirt thing, I totally feel that. Like, I got a bunch of t-shirts, and I didn't get any double XL because it was an extra $5 or whatever. So it's like, nobody's double XL. The first 3 people were like, double XL, please.
Rookie
I'm
move,
like, are you serious?
Yeah. It's funny how that works, hey?
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened to us.
Like, who's double XL?
Apparently a lot of our
Apparently
fans.
a lot of people, yeah. So, I guess just kind of on the more personal side of things, I just kind of wondering, like, what is your guys' maybe earliest memories of kind of like metal music?
I'll let you take this one.
Mine was a cassette tape of Seventh Son of a Seventh Son that Dad gave to me, which is really odd because my dad's a punk.
Yeah.
Like, he grew up on the Clash, Sex Pistols, Stranglers, all that kind of stuff, right? But there was a couple of cassette tapes that he had, and he gave me Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. And that, I remember trying to start a band. I think I must have been like 8 or 9, and I was trying to start a band back then, and I was singing the lyrics to, I think it was Clairvoyant or something like that. Like, I had my headphones on and I am wailing in my bedroom. I can still see this clear as like yesterday. And I'm like rolling around on my bed screaming these lyrics, and my dad is laughing at me from the bedroom door. And so when I take the headphones off, he's like, "Yeah, singing's not for you, son." But
that's when you decided to be a drummer.
Yeah. Well, that was my first kind of introduction to metal.
Yeah.
And then I went down the punk road. I learned to play drums to punk music, watching basically MTV and air drumming that way. And then I watched friends play a talent show at school, and they were playing Green Day songs. That was my first mosh pit. Came out with a black eye and was like, yeah, this is what I want to make music. So pestered my parents for drums, and then played in punk bands, played in mathcore bands, played in pop punk bands, and then I never played in a metal band until Illyrian. So Illyrian is my first metal band. So yeah.
Awesome.
I had kind of the opposite trajectory. I started kind of more on the punk side. I remember in junior high, as many of us are in junior high, I was very angsty, very angry at the world, and I remember discovering, like, old school AFI. This is right before Sing the Sorrow had come out, and I think Sing the Sorrow is a fine album, but really it's the turning point for AFI. And like, bands like Rise Against hadn't really gotten anywhere. I think Siren Song for the Countercultural had just come out, so I was listening to a lot of that style of punk. And then pretty funny, the way I got into metal was on the Mission Impossible 2 soundtrack. There was this shitty Metallica song. I think it's called I Disappear, I think is the track. I hope you can like play it right now and just like barrage people's eardrums with the heinous song. Anyway, so 14-year-old me was like, "This is the tits." So I remember like going to HMV or whatever the fuck it was at the time, ABC Records or something. I remember this distinct memory of like picking up a copy of Metallica's Saint Anger and holding it in one hand. God, what an awful album. But on the other hand, I had this Disturbed album, and I'd like heard a Disturbed song on the radio or something, and this is like one of those moments that like alternate reality me like chose the Disturbed album, and like I'd end up doing heroin and like die in a ditch somewhere 5 years later. But me in this timeline took the Metallica album. I listened to that terrible fucking Trash Can snare, and I was like, "This is what I was born to do." And so that kind of, and then I quickly discovered, I was like, actually, that's a terrible Metallica album. Then you discover the original 4, and then you go on to Megadeth and thrash metal at large, and kind of go from there. And so that was kind of me, into high school years. And so I was the guy wearing the leather jacket. You know how you are in high school, you kind of, you find your clan, your identity, and you cling to that. So I found the metalheads, and metalheads are even more elitist in high school than they are outside of high school. So that really distills your taste in music. And I kind of really fell in love with the folk and the power and the symphonic side of things. And so my first serious endeavor into the metal scene was with a band named Animus Labyrinth. which was a symphonic metal thing that I started with a keyboard player, and we had a female vocalist, and so that's kind of where I cut my teeth in a more serious capacity. I'd kind of been part of bands, quote unquote, before that, and then unfortunately that fell apart, and right as it did, I'd been a guitar player for all those years. Right as it fell apart, these guys were looking for a bass player at the time, and I had kind of been playing bass on the side for this other band, just kind of helping some buddies out, and I started to really enjoy the instrument, and kind of had always been more on the, I guess, the rhythm side of guitars, if you had to put it onto a spectrum. So when they said they were looking for a bass player, I said, yeah, fuck it, you're playing metal, you're at the same spot that I'm at right now professionally, I'm sure I can play bass, no problem. And and then so I started playing bass, and turns out I should have been doing this years ago. This is much more my speed. I love being the low end. I love being the glue that holds it all together. So that's kind of where my trajectory has been.
Okay, cool. I can definitely relate kind of to that. That's what my clan was in high school too. I found the metalheads. I was like, my people, blood brothers. Yeah. And then back then, I used to appreciate the heaviness of metal. I first started with Rise Against. I think that was my first foray into kind of heavier music, and I just was kept looking for heavier and heavier things. So I got into punk, and then I eventually ended up at metal and Lamb of God and stuff like that. But then I started to after that, I really started to appreciate the other side of metal, the technicality of metal and the instrumentation of metal in general. It's some of the most technically precise music that you're ever going to listen to, I think. Maybe outside of classical music, and you can even see the roots of classical music in metal. It's just a heavier version of classical music.
Absolutely.
So that's what I really kind of started to appreciate about metal, is just the fucking talent that's there. So I guess maybe what do you think makes the metal scene maybe slightly different from some of the other music scenes that exist?
Have you ever seen Lord of the Rings? More specifically, The Hobbit. Those scenes where all the dwarves get together and they're drinking ale and they're fucking singing, they're dancing on the tables, they're punching each other and they're laughing about it. And I'm like, yeah, that's metal. You often hear from people that aren't kind of in the metal circles that they go to a metal show, and it's so rare that you meet somebody that didn't really appreciate or enjoy the experience, or say that comment where somebody goes down in the pit, the whole pit stops and pulls them up, and that's I think there's I'll use the word brotherhood or camaraderie to it, and that makes it sound very masculine, and I guess it is kind of a masculine style of music in terms of demographic, but I don't mean to make it inclusive like that. But there is a kind of a fellowship, I guess, for a lack of a better word, that I think metalheads really unite with one another. There was that internet video a couple of years back of running into a metalhead in the store or whatever, and they see each other and they both start windmilling, just kind of they have the symbol with the devil horns, it's yeah, you belong to this club, I understand that club. And sometimes that can be negative, sometimes that can be interpreted as the guys that carve Slayer into their forearm, and that can be very elitist and very pretentious in its own ways. But, I think that from the outside looking in, it can look like quite a violent culture. And then when you're on the inside looking around, it's just everybody's just here to have a good time, it's... And the people that are dicks about it, they're probably dicks in general. So, that's not mutually exclusive to being somebody who enjoys the genre of metal music.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like the wood elves. They look down upon everyone else, so we're not going to help with the ring. But that's a good analogy. Yeah, I mean, you got the dwarves, you got the beards,
tattoos,
and then the elves have got the long hair, and it's perfect.
Yeah, I appreciate the Lord of the Rings analogy. I definitely agree too. I actually went to, I'm not as much in the metal scene as I used to be when I was younger, but I actually went to this metal festival last year in Mexico City. And it was called Hell and Heaven But even though most of the people there were from Mexico, and I did not speak their language, you go into the pit with these people, and they're your brothers or your sisters or whatever. Like, they come up to you, they throw their arm around you, and they're trying to talk to you, and just everybody's having a good time. People fall down, you get picked up. I lost my glasses in the pit, and everybody's like, "Stop the pit!" And everybody's like looking around for glasses. I'm like, "Guys, they're gone." They're like, "No, we're gonna find them." Like,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, there is like this camaraderie towards like metal that almost doesn't exist in some of the other scenes. Like, it's very interesting to me. And yes, like, again, it also looks scary, but like, metalheads are some of the most friendly people you're ever going to meet.
9 out of 10 times, they're usually fucking teddy bears. You
Yeah,
know? Like,
exactly.
it's very well-spoken individuals who happen to love really loud music. And it's,
Yeah.
And they smell good, most of them too.
Most-
The
most-
hair
most of
product and everything.
Yeah.
Most of them smell good. I mean, Loud as Hell did this great thing this year with the hashtag Metal Family Reunion. And I think that just kind of speaks volumes. That kind of says it all. And it definitely was that this year for me. It was great to go around and see everyone. And you almost didn't have enough time to play, drink, and see everyone and watch bands and stuff. So, but yeah, that hashtag really kind of sums it up for me.
I think you bring up an interesting point by mentioning drink in your descriptors there too, and I think that there's definitely a culture around drinking and getting drunk in metal, and I think that is interesting. Like, I think that kind of exists in country music to an extent. I think you look at something like EDM, that's kind of more like you're doing MDMA or doing psychedelics. Like, there's an inebriant kind of behind it, and metal. 9 out of 10 times it's like, you're in the pit with your buddies having a few brews or whatever, and I'm sure that kind of goes a bit of a way towards that camaraderie field. But it can also go the other way, right? Like, I'm always surprised that I see guys pound 12, 13 beers and they're not picking fights. They're not like, they're tanked and their buddy's like, "Okay, you've had too much, go back to your tent." And they're like, "Yeah, rock on," and they like fuck off and go to their tent. There's no problems, right? Like, yeah, it's just interesting that, and I think that can be kind of intimidating to people as they look at it and they're like, "Look at this sea of bearded men that are just crushing these beers," and that can be a lot if you're not used to that. But like I say, it's the dwarves, man. Like, they want nothing but to just party with each other.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10 as well. Like, going back to your point, like, people that aren't in the metal scene, I've convinced a few friends from the skiing world, when I've put shows on in Banff and stuff, I've convinced them to come down and watch a metal show. And one of my friends, she came down, she's never really listened to metal. When she listened to the Round 2 Fight album, she was like, "This is giving me anxiety, and I can't calm down right now, and I don't know what to do." But then when she came to the show, it was a different story. She was like, "This is amazing. I feel like I can take on the world now." And she was just like invincible after the show. And I think she still goes to shows now. So yeah, once you convert one, they're for life, So.
Yeah. Metal music definitely makes you feel a certain way. Like, when I need to get shit done, I'll put on metal music, and I'm like, I am fucking fired up right now. Like, when I just like need to crush it at work, I'm like, okay, just metal music, and I will get the shit done.
There's a reason it's on a lot of gym playlists.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I guess what is one of your guys' favorite shows that you've played in this band?
I think we probably both have the same answer for this. We had the opportunity to play with a little band named Power Glove. Was that last summer? Yeah, last summer. Power Glove, if you're not familiar with them, they're an instrumental metal band that transposes video game music. That's their whole deal, hence the name Power Glove. That is an old controller you could use for video gaming. So anyway, I remember listening to, and this is going to date me, I remember listening to Power Glove on MySpace back in the day. And, they're doing Mega Man tunes or, Tetris theme. And so they came across our board, we saw that they were doing this tour, And we started getting a flood of messages being like, you guys got to get on this show. You guys are, you have a record about video games. It's called Round 2 Fight, for God's sakes. Like, you guys are a great fit for this. And, while musically we're not necessarily what they're doing with video games, we have our own take on it. We did get on the show and we met the guys, and they're phenomenal dudes. Really, really great guys. We still chat with them here and there. And, that was such a sweet experience to just like A, be playing on stage with somebody who's somebody, and B, just like having those somebodies be just very level-headed people, and we're very receptive to giving us feedback and criticism, and we're just happy to have us at the show. To me, it was kind of this moment of like, oh, okay, like, there are the rock stars, the Kanye West of this world, sure, but a lot of these guys are just people just playing music for a living, and that's sweet, and they're just great regular dudes. That was a big milestone for me, and I'm sure for all of us.
Yeah, I think we'd all agree on that. And just fun fact, August 23rd last year
No shit.
was when we played Dickens with Power Glove.
Oh, no way.
So it's a year to the date.
Yeah.
That was the last time we played Calgary too.
Oh, crazy. And for what it's worth, if you're listening to this, then it is Friday, August 23rd. We are playing tonight at Dickens. It's our CD release, so come have a few pints, get in the mosh pit with us.
What's it like to see people moshing to your music?
It doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
No, I'm kidding.
You can't see anything from back there.
Yeah. I'm so focused.
It's sweet, and it's definitely sweet because it's always unprompted. We're never like, yeah, let's get a circle pit going. And maybe we should do that. I don't know. That's never really been our thing. But it's, when you see guys that like get into it, like they're bobbing their heads, they're like, yeah, and they turn to their buddy and they're just like, poof, and their buddy's like, yeah, poof, and that's all it takes, and suddenly there's a mosh pit. That's a really sweet feeling. For me, one of the most surreal things is like anytime we play Round 2 Fight, there's a good like dozen people in the crowd that chant Round 2 Fight, fists raised at us. And like, that's a fucking sweet feeling. I'm like, all right, it's a pretty easy thing to follow. Cool, you could just be saying goldfish, right? Like, for all I know. But the energy, the enthusiasm of you like singing that back at us, like that's why I get out of bed in the morning, man. What are we doing if not for that moment, And I find that when the mosh pits break out, that's very similar to that. It's just like, yeah, you want to go and do some things. We are right there with you, buddy. Let's be the soundtrack to doing those things.
Yeah. To be fair, I don't like it when bands like prompt mosh pit. They're like, okay, we're moshing to this song. It's like, shut up. Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah. I want to stand here and drink.
Yeah. One time I wanted to stand there and drink, and the lead singer from the band, small show, jumped into the crowd and instantly hit me and knocked my beer on the ground. And I was like, sir?
That sucks. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want you to know that guy died in a bus accident like 3 weeks later. So that's... Oh, was I not supposed to say that?
That's karma for you.
Yeah. Never knock a man's beer out of his hand.
Cliff Burton? I gotta say, sorry. Like, that's... Too soon? Always too soon.
So I guess let's talk a little bit about the album release show. It's happening August 23rd, this Friday. It is Wednesday today. This will hopefully be out by tomorrow. So, yeah, I guess plug the shit out of the album release show.
We have 4 amazing bands. Can I call us amazing? Is that
3
humble?
amazing bands.
3 amazing bands.
And us.
We have Hyperia. Very hungry bunch of people at the moment. They're making a big splash. They work really hard. They're really tight, so it's kind of a no-brainer to ask them to be on the bill. And they'll blow it up. I know they will. Then we have Hazard, who need no introduction, really. I got a sneak peek listen to their up-and-coming album, and I don't think there's any words to describe how good that album's going to be. And if they don't go like double platinum with that, then there's something wrong with the world. If those of you that don't know Hazard, they have a singing drummer, and he's flawless. Then they have this little guy that plays guitar. He's okay. He's okay. He can play okay guitar. But yeah, another shredding band. And then we have good friends of ours from Edmonton coming down, Tides of Quran. How would you describe them, Jeff?
Oh, they're straight Gothenburg. They're, new age of Montmartre. It's three brothers, just the greatest dudes. Garrett, their singer, he has a thing where he doesn't wear shoes, and he also eats chicken wings on stage. Just these are the kind of people we need in the metal scene,
Yeah.
That guy gets it.
Incredibly tight, though. All those guys use in-ears, and they're on click track, and that's the one thing that always pops to my mind when I watch them is just like how that they couldn't get any tighter. They really couldn't. And then their music is insanely catchy too. So I don't know if they've played Dickens before, so I'm excited to have them play at Dickens on a good sounding stage, and they'll blow that up too. And then it's us afterwards. But yeah, we're doing the show ourselves in with Dickens, and I think it's got some hype about it, and I think it's gonna do really well. I think, and we're hustling tickets really hard. So if anyone is still in need for tickets, message us on the day. We'll figure it out. But I would love to sell out Dickens and have bragging rights for that. Yeah, it would be really good if we could do that. So
yeah, and we're in Edmonton the following day on the Saturday, the 24th. We're playing Rendezvous, which is a local haunt of ours up there, and I think that show might be sold out, or it's not sold out. It's super close to selling out. And that's a sweet feeling, being in a city that's not your own. You're like, fucking hey, we sold out up here. Yeah. Like, that's sweet. Yeah, it's to plug a few other shows we got coming up. Have we talked about? Have we announced other shows at all? Are we allowed to talk about this?
not next year.
Not next year, but the ones in September.
September, yes.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. So we've got we're playing in Kelowna somewhere.
19th.
The 19th.
At Munnins Post.
Munnins Post, thank you. September 20th in Vancouver. That's a Friday at Discordia.
Astoria.
Fuck, I really gotta get this figured
Just
out.
need to slow down on the beers.
No,
You're not doing
I gotta do vocals.
You're not doing vocals today. Yeah, we're doing the Astoria on the 20th in Vancouver. That's with Exterminatus. They're headlining the show. And then we're hop skipping over to Nanaimo, playing the Canby. And then, fingers crossed, there'll be another show on the island after that too. So we got a little jaunt around BC, see some of our good friends over there and plug this new record. And then I think there's some thing in the works for October, but that's it at the moment.
We've got a show in November, I think, but I can't remember the details of it. But that's years from now. So.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we got a little string of shows coming up here.
Super cool. So I guess just any final things that you guys want to throw out there before we close out this podcast?
We have some weeks that we all sit down and we look at ourselves and say, what are we doing here? Why are we busting our balls trying to make this work? And, it can be deflating as fuck sometimes, and you tell your parents, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna go sleep in this van for 4 days and make $100 at this show, I guarantee, and eat gas station sandwiches until I shit out my intestines. And they're like, yeah, okay, that's cool. And I'm like, no, it's awful. But there is something to be said about the experience, and I think that, when we're old ass wrinkly men, I'll look back on it very fondly and say, like, yeah, regardless if we make it or don't, like, I'm enjoying the hell out of this right now. For all the bad days and weeks that we have some really, truly great moments and some phenomenal luck here and there where we just happen to cross paths with somebody that can help us and helps us grow organically or introduces us to their network. And it's such a cool feeling to. I had this experience last winter where I was walking by Night Owl, rest in peace, and I saw this girl wearing an Illyrian hoodie, and I just kind of casually, I was like, oh, cool hoodie. And she looked at me and kind of disgustedly and was like, thanks, and like went back to talking to her friend. And it was like the most humbling moment of my life. I was like, fuck yeah, I'm part of something bigger than myself. And like just shit like that, you know, like the moment should have been not as flattering as it was, but I was like, yeah, cool, like wearing my brand, you don't even know who I am. Like, fucking A. That's
an everyday Bruce Wayne over here. Whereas when I see people in Illyrian shirts, they're like, oh hey, English guy, mustache. No, I'm kidding. No one ever really cares about the drummer anyway.
Yeah, I guess my closing thoughts there would be like, if you are in a band and you do have those moments of like, what the fuck are we doing here? Just keep going, you know. And that's like, that really applies for a lot of shit in life too, right? Like,
yeah, it applies to any creative endeavor. Like, just remember why you're doing it. It's
Yeah.
because you love doing it.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah. It's certainly not for the money.
Yeah. You're lucky if you break even, folks. Cool. Where's the album available?
Everywhere.
Everywhere?
Yeah, like you go talk to your guy at the corner store and no, I'm just kidding. So you can listen to it on your usual platforms, Google Play, Spotify, iTunes, if it still exists. Who knows, by Friday it might not exist anymore. You can check out our website. That's www.illyrianband.com. We've got an e-store that you can order a physical or digital copy. We have a Bandcamp page that you can order the digital copy of the album from as well. Or if you're in Calgary, just shoot us a message. We're always happy to meet up with people and get to know our scene, get to know our folks. And we'd love to bring an album out to you and say hi, give you a high five. And I think actually you can even find our records at Sunrise Records now. They've got this great thing where they plug local talent, and if they put your stuff on the shelves. So I believe we have some stuff on the shelves there, or if we don't, we will very soon. So
Cool. I'll have all the links in the episode notes so people can find you on social media, where they can purchase all your stuff. That'll be in the episode notes. So if anybody is interested, go into the episode notes, check that out, hook up with Illyrian, and come out to the show on Friday. Thank you very much for being on the podcast, guys.
This isn't a dream, it's been rising, a hunger meant for tithing, serving your death devising secretic greedy. A cup of chaos to serve as a bedrock. Diabetes spouting death drops climbing down. Fix them together like a disc jockey's fifth and shit. The carbohydrates will go right to your ribs. Inject the hatred, but only if they're shaking it. There comes the sorrow, it doesn't have to make it back. Last is the power you're cooking with fire.
If you liked this episode of the podcast, why not leave a review? You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. For up-to-date information on the podcast, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. You can find us at FrogE Style Productions. That's Frog, the letter E, Style Productions. For more ways to support the show, visit fsproductions.ca.